Thank you, sir. We shall now move on to the first session of the day, Machine Learning Algorithms for Wireless Communication by our chief guest, Dr. Sai Dheeraj Amru. Without any further ado, I invite the speaker. Over to you, sir.
Is it okay if I turn off my video to save bandwidth while I
Yes, sir.
present?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Fine. Fine.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I will touch
Just
upon
1 minute. Bonu Sahib Pindi, please turn off your mic. Yes, please.
Sure. Good morning again. So I will be talking about how we can apply machine learning for a variety of wireless communication problems, and I will also show you a flavor of problems that my group and I work with my students here at IIT Hyderabad and in the past also. So I've touched upon machine learning across defense domains. Some of my research in the past was motivated by problems that were given by US Department of Defense, and recently I've been working on some problems in LTE and 5G with my experience that I'm coming from designing 5G. So I'll not trouble you bother with my bio again, but so firstly I'll talk about why machine learning makes sense for wireless communications, and then what is machine learning, and finally applications of machine learning in wireless. And a lot of figures are borrowed from several people, Osvaldo, Dhruv, and some of my students. So I started machine learning back in 2012, and I have been exploring machine learning for wireless communications since then. Although when deep learning was still not a fancy word, I mean, in 2012, I think was the first breakthrough of deep learning for computer vision. It was still in initial baby stages where I was looking at machine learning, but I was looking at a different flavor of machine learning called statistical learning techniques, Markov decision process, reinforcement learning, multi-arm bandits, etc. And but very recently, I mean, in the last 3-4 years, I have also definitely caught up with this deep learning hype and exploring how it helps for wireless communications. So when I joined IIT Hyderabad, there were several courses in wireless communications like this, all the traditional courses, and there were several courses in machine learning. So IITH is the first institute across the world actually to start a BTech and MTech programs in AI. It's a dedicated program starting with random processes, data analytics, linear algebra, matrix theory, and going all the way into deep basics of deep learning and the mathematics of deep learning. So when I had joined it, my colleagues had suggested me to bridge these two topics considering my background, and that's when I created a course called Machine Learning for Wireless Communications. And it was a good success that I had by taking very good students. And it has always, whenever I've taught the course, it has always resulted in some publications because people were interested and they continued some research. So I would consider, it has taught me a thing or two more from the students. So nowadays, actually, you learn a lot from students because students, they explore a lot more than how much you can explore. So they have taught me a lot more during this course. So why machine learning for wireless makes sense is because we are moving to a very connected world. It is no longer connectivity for humans, it is connectivity for machines. Like it was mentioned in the inaugural session, there will be massive devices, number of devices. Even in our home, there will be a device in a television, microwave, refrigerator, wherever, or a mixie, whatever you think of it, you can, a washing machine, you can think of putting an IoT device in every equipment that you can think of. At least the use cases that the government of India is thinking of right now are equipping IoT devices in energy meters, water meters, etc. so that they can avoid any power theft, etc., and also reduce the manual intervention in electricity bill collection or water meter connection, reduce the water usage. And so, I mean, recently Telangana government has come up with a rule saying that there will be water meters installed everywhere, and every house has to be accountable for after X number of liters of usage, so that the groundwater consumption is not unjustly used. These are great things, but you need to think about how you will make this a reality for a country like India. Billions of devices, you need the backbone for all of these devices to be able to connect it. So to be able to make this network, you can no longer have a predictive network, but you need reactive networks, and reactive networks is where machine learning comes into picture. You kind of already predict, and you already know that something is you need predictive networks rather than reactive networks. Reactive is something happens and then I react. So let's say there's a power failure, there's a grid failure, and then I do something. No, I want to predict that there will be a grid failure, and then I will do something. I will reduce the load on one of the distribution point, and increase the load on another distribution point, or I will reduce the power consumption, or send a message to some of the IoT devices saying that enter into a power saving mode. All this is possible only when you have some sort of intelligence across the entire network. This intelligence, I mean, this is where machine learning plays a big role. Is it easy? No. I mean, it takes millions of minds to actually make this a reality. It is at local access site level. It will be a distributed site level. For instance, local. So, for instance, these devices are what you and I use in our homes, like our car, bus, whatever it could be. But these local sites are something where distribution operators like Jio, Airtel come into picture, and then they are all connected to a backbone called as a core network. There needs to be intelligence even there, how to distribute the load across these sites. And then eventually there's a national site. There is how many cell sites I can define, how many cell sites should be operating, how many spectrum bands I should define. So there's intelligence available, and that is required at every different part of a network distribution. So to make this a reality, I think machine learning definitely makes a lot of sense. And on the right side, you just see some applications like UAVs. These are all fancy use cases, but at least the most relevant use cases that I am focusing on, which I see a lot of traction in the government, is IoTs for energy meters, etc. I mean, the hype definitely, I mean, there's a lot of, it's not just academic research. Now it has gone beyond academic research. Now there's industrial research, and beyond industrial research, there is also standards bodies which are there, which define how things should be deployed in a real network. See, spectrum is a shared commodity, right? I mean, no one can send whatever they want. Spectrum is costly for a particular reason. No, if you cannot do whatever you want, there are certain rules that you have to obey. And when you have to obey to that rules, there will be something called as standard bodies like 3GPP, UN body called as ITU. So all of them are coming together, and before the machine learning actually becomes a reality in networks, because right now it is still at industrial level and academic level. Now, before even people start deploying it, see, if I deploy machine learning without any rules, ground rules, right? I mean, I can do whatever I want in the spectrum that's available to me, and you can do whatever you want. And then eventually both of us end up not doing anything because my thing might clash with your thing. So there should be some rules, and that is where the standard bodies have also come into picture, and things happen much ahead of time, right? So that's what's happening right now. There are standard bodies already defining what machine learning should be there. There is work already happening in 3GPP, and some baby steps are being taken from a physical layer, wireless networks layer as well by 3GPP in this year. In the next 2 years, 3GPP will define some form of machine learning interfaces inside their standard. So a lot of activity is going on. Wi-Fi body has already defined some framework where they have changed the way the Wi-Fi packets are sent, so that the packet can be used for doing some sensing activity, where sensing, most companies have proposed machine learning is used for sensing. But what they did was they changed the way their standard is defined to aid machine learning use cases. So I mean, just skies does the limit. Everyone, things are going at a very rapid pace. If you want to contribute, there are lots of avenues. So, what does this hype lead to? Uh, it can help you open some startups. Here, I've given a couple of startups that I am familiar with because I have friends in this. Co-founders are friends of my friends. Uhana is a Stanford-based startup. They have deployed their reinforcement learning algorithms in a network in Israel and Australia, and they have proved that reinforcement learning algorithms can actually improve the network throughput. DeepSeek is a startup in US from Virginia Tech. They have used machine learning for spectrum sensing predominantly, and they have sold their solutions to the US Department of Defense. Actually, some Indian entities are also talking. I cannot name the names, give out the names of Indian entities, but they are also talking to DeepSeek to procure their solutions or at least identify where they can be used. The DeepSeek focus is to identify malicious activity in a defense setting. Now, actually, DeepSeek is even exploring machine learning uses in 5G networks. These are just two startups, but at least that have gained quite a popular name. There could be several more. And of course, there's an old slide here, but you can publish a lot of papers. Several low-hanging fruits people have already solved in the last 4 or 5 years. But I think it would be better to make wise, take and choose wise research problems rather than low-hanging fruits now. I myself have written some white papers on machine learning for 6G wireless communication networks, where the entire focus is on machine learning at various layers of a wireless network, at physical layer, MAC layer, network layer. In physical layer, how you can do it for waveform design. In MAC layer, how you can do it for scheduling problems like IoT devices. There are several and hundreds of wireless IoT devices. How do you schedule these devices? How do you ensure the QoS for all of these devices is ensured? How do you ensure fairness across all of these devices? At the network layer, how do you route different protocols? How do you avoid distributed denial of service attacks? Several more problems. Is a very nice paper that has come up. It's available on arXiv and openly available. It's again a year old. But yes, it came out very well. So please feel free to look at it. And it has also come up with a lot of memes. This is from a very famous professor in US, Robert Heath. So he says that in the past, if you were doing wireless communication research, ML, everyone put ML in their papers 7 years ago, where ML meant maximum likelihood. Do you still think that ML means maximum likelihood? But apparently nowadays ML is only machine learning. So if you have machine learning in your paper, it will get more citations and more hits than maximum likelihood nowadays. And another meme from the same person, which I personally like. So this red person is asking the blue person, hey, why aren't you going to class? Why are you in a coffee shop? This person says, I sent my machine and the machine is learning for him. This fellow just responds saying, me too, isn't machine learning great? So the machine is learning for him. I personally don't like this way of communication because, when the pandemic started, I had to teach online, and it was I didn't have a great experience teaching online because I enjoy only in-person interactions. It was I'm getting feedback from students when you see them. You know who is attentive and who is not, and they ask you more questions. I hope classroom teaching doesn't turn out to be what you see here. All right. So now giving you some background where the world is moving, industry, startups, papers, etc. So let's actually go into some research-oriented discussion. So why is machine learning, why does it make sense? So for a traditional, let's say BPSK detection, most of you are familiar with BPSK detection. So I have a BPSK signal plus minus 1, and I have additive white Gaussian noise with zero mean and some variance. your typical maximum likelihood detector will check if the received signal has crossed a particular energy of the received signal has crossed a particular threshold, and I will say if it is a bit 1 or a bit 0. Now, what happens if the same algorithm is taken for a different environment where, as a very simple example, let us assume that there is a DC offset or the mean of the noise has changed. I mean, it is no longer zero mean, but it is, let's say a very simple example, mean is 1. So if I continue to use the same algorithm, if I continue to rely on the same detection mechanism, definitely I'll be making wrong detections. So to avoid this, can we do something? Yes, I mean, if you have a machine learning based detector, it is looking at what is happening in the environment, and it tells you what you can do. So I mean, we have done, I mean, this is a very toy example that one of my, I make the students do in the course. So when you take the system model of y equal to x plus n, signal plus noise, BPSK signal and noise is AWGN with SNR. So when the model is exactly what you know, it is zero mean AWGN with the variance defined by SNR. The maximum likelihood detector and the machine learning detector, which here we are using k-means, they perform the same. See, machine learning will not beat theory. If for problems that you know the theoretically optimum solution, you cannot beat theory. And even if you say something like that, people will laugh at you. So be careful when you do such research problems, right? Right, but now when you change the mean, the maximum likelihood detector definitely starts falling back behind the machine learning performance. And here, when the mean has gone slightly higher, you will actually start seeing that the traditional, I mean, existing, if you still hung on to a model that I assume that it is a zero mean variance, I mean, the maximum likelihood detector, assuming zero mean, will fail. Of course, if I change the maximum likelihood definition, of course, it will start performing better. But what we mean here is, if you assume that the model is the same as your theory in the past, your performance will start flooring, but machine learning will kind of do better. So with this motivation, machine learning, you can define, I mean, I don't have to explain to all of you now. By now, you may have heard about this several talks. But these are two definitions that I personally like, and I try to apply it to every problem that I work on. So essentially, it is an algorithm or is a method that can automatically detect patterns in the data. It is not like what a data analyst does. He goes and sits and tries to identify patterns, but it is something that it can automatically detect pattern in a data and use these detected patterns to do something interesting, right? Either predict what is the future data or predict other outcomes of interest. And what happens if there are missing data? It can understand something that there is some missing data and something might be happening. Another very important definition that I feel is the most prominent for wireless communication is to say that it is an algo which improves the performance at a P at a particular task T by using experience E. I will formalize this with wireless examples in the next few slides. So what is different from machine learning and engineering approaches are that in traditional engineering methods, what you do is you acquire some domain knowledge. So you do a lot of experiments. You see that something is happening in a particular environment, and you jot down a lot of notes, and you identify that, Achha, this is what's happening in so and so environment. And so what should I do? Once I have done this, I come up with a mathematical or a physics-based model. And finally, I design an algorithm for that particular model that I have defined. But is it always possible? So let's think of the wireless problem that we all are familiar with. It's a channel modeling problem. So is it? So we know that Nakamura-Hata model, cost model, free space propagation model, lambda by d square model. We know of all these models. But how did they come up with? People did a lot of measurements in a lot of environments, and they said that the received signal behaves in a particular, the received signal power behaves in a particular fashion in a particular environment. But is it possible to collect these data in each and every environment? Like for instance, these data was done in countries, I mean, there could be some were done in Japan, some were done in US, but were they done in India? No. I mean, the short answer is no, but I'm not going into the specifics of it. My colleague from IIT Madras, he did a lot of studies in 2016, which is why India specific 5G standard came up, but that's a discussion for some other day. And only because he did the studies, we found out that the models are much different from what you have in the US, China, and every other country versus India, and that what you design for US is not applicable for India. So that's why we had to design an India specific 5G standard. Again, it's a discussion for some other day. But yes, coming back to the problem, we will not be able to collect data for all particular settings. So those measurements were done in rural Tamil Nadu. I mean, are those same studies valid for Delhi? Are the studies for Delhi valid for Bombay? Are the studies for Bombay valid for New York? We don't know, I mean, unless you do it. So it's practically impossible to collect data for all kinds of terrains, all kinds of weather conditions, etc. So this is where machine learning can help us. What we do is we select a general purpose model. We say that it has to behave within the boundaries of this specific model. And then we give several boundary conditions that it should have a D square kind of a behavior, or it should have a dual slope path loss model. We give some constraints for it. And we define a learning algorithm, and we feed a lot of data to it. We don't do physics-based modeling, but we just feed a lot of data. The data is available, right? It is available from your cell phone, my cell phone, Wi-Fi devices, indoor devices. There's lots of devices already available. At least, I mean, data is easily available. So we take an algo, we feed a lot of data to it. And we say that this data is resulting in a particular fashion. I mean, this data tells us that when I feed the data to the algo, it will tell that for this kind of data, please do this. For a different kind of data, please do this. So this is where machine learning helps us. So summarizing it, so designing a decoding algorithm for a fading channel under conventional engineering approach, right? So what we do is we collect a physical model of the propagation channel between transmitter and receiver, and we develop a solution for the specific problem, and it would yield optimal guarantees only under the given model. Examples are binary erasure channel, or a binary symmetric channel, or an AWGN channel that we talked in a few slides ago. I can design a communication TXRX communication model only for that specific channel model. Yeah. Again, just think about the AWGN example that we took in the last few slides. But again, it is restricted to that particular channel. So that's why actually, if you think about why channel coding is not behaving optimality in all conditions. So for instance, LDPC, etc., they have been proved to be optimal only in particular channel conditions. But polar coding is one of the reason it became very popular is because its optimality was proved for a lot of different channel conditions, not just erasure channel, but a lot of other channel conditions. People have proved that it is optimal. The machine learning approach in contrast to the traditional engineering, it can help us avoid the time-consuming step of acquiring the domain knowledge. What we do is the machine is selected from a general purpose model. We define a mapping between input and output called as a hypothesis class. It may or may not require some knowledge. It again depends on the problem. Of course, if I don't have the knowledge, what will happen is the problem definition, the hypothesis class will become quite large, and then your learning times, the amount of data that you might need may shoot up. To avoid that, I mean, some domain knowledge is always useful. So that's one thing that I stress in my class is don't treat machine learning as a tool. Machine learning in conjunction with wireless communications is quite important. You need to know some wireless communications background in order to be able to do anything reliable for wireless communication. So without knowing domain knowledge, I mean, If you don't know the problem that you're working on, there is no point in applying machine learning. So domain knowledge is very, very important. Don't think of ML as a tool. ML is a tool on top of a domain that you apply. Yes. So for instance, for the example of channel decoder, machine learning approach can help us forego the understanding of the physical principles of radio propagation. At least you should know that you need to collect data in so and so environment. So you need to know that yes, channel changes, there is multipath, it will change in a particular way when there are valleys or when there are mountains, versus when it is an urban environment, when there are buildings, when there's a lot of concrete, it behaves different. You need to have some kind of domain knowledge. And of course, it relies on a large number of examples of received signals. All of us, right? I mean, you keep hearing data sets. Definitely, that is a big part of machine learning. Now, as signal processing engineers, we must have learned something about adaptive signal processing, like least mean squares, recursive least squares, Kalman filters, etc. Those are all adaptive algorithms. What is the difference between adaptive versus learning? So adaptive is something like I see what's happening and then I change the way I behave. There's essentially no memory in the system. It's more like a reactive system that we talked in the first few slides. But learning is a superset of an adaptive system. It is able to see that now something happened. Definitely I know what is going to happen in the, or maybe not definitely, maybe I'll say that with 90% confidence I know that something like this will happen in the next few time instances. So I'm going to do so and so kind of actions in the next few time instances. So that is where learning supersedes adaptive algorithms or adaptation. Right. So evaluate the outcome of the decisions taken and gather knowledge. Yeah. So I've taken some decisions that I will behave so and so in the next few time instances. They may or may not be good, but I will again keep that behavior in my memory and see that, okay, I did take this decision, but seems like it did not work. Let me do something else. It's almost like a human mind, right? The next time you try not to make a mistake. So that is what learning is. We don't adapt. We actually learn. That's what a child's brain does, right? Yeah, so a simple example again I give for students is think of a weather setting example. So let's say I step out of the house, I see the clouds, I see that it's raining, then I wear a jacket, go back to home, wear a jacket and come back. That's like adaptive. I'm seeing what's happening and then I'm doing. But what if I do something like today the weather is like this, maybe tomorrow it will be 50% chance of rain, so I'll step out of the house with an umbrella in my hand. That's more like learning, right? I'm trying to use my knowledge to take an informed decision in the future. A learning device kind of gathers data from several devices, like sensing devices. For us, it's like sensory organs. We learn how to combine data from different devices in a sensible manner and feeds them to an adaptive block, right? So there is step 1 and 2, which are beyond the adaptation algorithm. And I mean, these are low-level details of how will I combine the data and all. There are something like cost functions, etc., etc. So formal definition of learning is one of the that we saw a few slides ago. Again, a system is said to learn from an experience E with respect to a task T with a performance measure P if its performance at the task T as measured by P improves with experience E. Please don't worry. Let's take the example here. So from a communication system, I mean, the most common task that we all have is to decode bits at a receiver. And what is my experience? Experience is nothing but observing the received signal for a known transmitted bit. What is a known transmitted bit? Those are pilot signals or reference signals. And how do I measure my performance? Nothing but the bit error rate, right? So I will say that my machine learning enabled communication system is doing good if I decode bits at the receiver with 0% probability of error or very low probability of error by observing the received signal on the pilot signal. So for instance, the traditional way that we do right now is we transmit pilot signals, we estimate the channel, We use that channel to decode bits at the receiver. But definitely this is also not always 100% correct, because the time when you send the pilots may be different from the time when you got the data, and the channel may have already changed. Imagine you are zooming at a high speed on a highway, you are at 80 to 100 kilometer per hour. More often than not, you must have observed that your call drops. Why? Because you're zooming at such a high speed, there's Doppler. Pilot signals are not able to estimate the channel. Instead, what do I do? What we have done, at least one very small problem that we have addressed in LTE and 5G systems, we predict the channel. Use the pilot signals. I predict that I'm moving at an X speed. I predict the channel for the next several time instances, and I use the predicted channel to decode bits at the receiver. And of course, voila, I have improved my throughput and reduced the probability of bit error. That's when I am saying that I am actually learning by looking at what's happening around. With this context, I mean, I'm sure you have seen all of this. So AI is a very broad definition. Anything which has intelligence is called as an AI engine. It can just be a rule engine. It can be like a simple if else conditions that we write. Within AI, it is a very narrow domain of machine learning, where supervised, unsupervised, whatever you have learned in the past, too many blogs around, too many YouTube videos around, supervised, unsupervised reinforcement learning. Within machine learning, a very narrow field called as deep learning, where we only rely on neural networks and connecting neural networks in very different fancy ways. Within deep learning, our applications of wireless networks is again a very small, tiny domain. So you need to know when to really apply machine learning, right? So the advantages of using machine learning definitely are lower cost, faster deployment, and reduced implementation complexity. Considering the channel model example, you don't need to derive a physics-based model, right? It is very painful. I mean, to actually do a line fitting, a slope fitting, etc., using all the amount of data and ensuring that your data fits for all of them. I mean, now you have tools and software to do it, but generally in the past it was very complex. But it's tedious, so it reduces your implementation complexity. So that's one advantage of machine learning. But what are the disadvantages, right? You never really know why it is working. So it is lack of interpretability. I mean, it's almost more often than not a black box. Still efforts are being made. I have been saying this, that still efforts are being made from the last few talks that I've given, but yes, still efforts are being made. But I don't know when people will really be able to answer that, yes, this is why deep learning works. And you cannot always guarantee that it will work. You can only give probabilistic guarantees that that it will work with 85% success rate, right? 85% success rate means what? I mean, you don't know if I give an image, it's actually succeeding on this image or not. I can only tell you 85% I will succeed on such an image or such a channel model. And its limited applicability, as we see in this slide. So we should use machine learning only when the traditional engineering flow is not suitable. So when, for instance, for a problem like y is equal to x plus an AWGN channel decoding, I know the theoretical bit error rate, I know the theoretical detection algorithm. I should only use that if I know that the channel will really behave like that. Only in situations when the traditional model is not suitable, only then. What are those cases? When it is either model deficit. I don't know the model of the channel. I don't know if it is a Rayleigh model, a Raytian model, or a Nakagami model. I don't know. I really don't know how the channel is going to behave in an indoor setting or in a high terrain or in a valley environment. Only then I can use it. It makes sense to use machine learning. Otherwise, use what you know. Or you don't have an algorithm. These are cases where you actually know the model, but the algo is just too painful to implement or too deep, or it is too complicated. Or for instance, power control algorithms in uplink wireless networks. There's no closed form solution to tell that this is what you have to do. In such cases, you have more often than not heuristic algorithms. So instead of heuristic, if you can employ machine learning to do something better, then it's okay. And machine learning can be used when you provide a clear feedback. I need to know how I'm behaving. If you do not tell me how my algo has worked, there's no point. I will not be learning from experience. I will only do with the data that you have given me in the past, and that data may be outdated. So then again, I mean, there should be some feedback with correct goals and metrics. The metrics and goals are important, right, to define your cost functions. I have to optimize so and so function. You design an algorithm to optimize the function. Of course, large data exists. There should not be logical reasoning or long chains that depend on diverse background knowledge or common sense. What is this? I mean, there's nothing but if there is memory involved, there's a state machine involved, very complicated state machine. If A, B, C, D, then do E, F, G, H. I mean, it's a complicated Markov chains. Of course, to a certain extent, you can use reinforcement learning with Markov decision process, but also it has some limitations. So you have to be careful when you can apply this. I think only human brains will be able to do such things to a major extent, but definitely machine learning, it may actually enter into saddle points when you apply it to such complicated problems. And definitely it should have a tolerance for error. I mean, this is the reason why applying machine learning to healthcare is not really, I mean, people are using it, but maybe still some human intervention is required, because if you say that with 95% probability, I'm able to detect that this person has COVID. What about the rest 5%? I mean, shall I let him go? Shall I let him move freely? No, I mean, still you need a medical diagnosis on top of this 95%, right? So that's why machine learning for healthcare is not still, at least from what I know, I mean, it's not getting approved by FDA or the government agencies. But for wireless, yes, it's okay, right? For instance, in machine learning for improving the voice quality, see, we have an innate quality that even if some packets drop off in a voice call, we can still kind of make sense. Like, I mean, more often than not, if we see that, I mean, there's a crackling in the voice, but we still try to understand what that person is talking. For such cases, yes, great, machine learning is great. But what if machine learning, when I'm seeing an online class, I don't want when some video frames drop. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is it okay? Is it not okay? It depends. Machine learning for telemedicine, right? Telemedicine, you have to be extremely careful. I mean, the tolerance for error is less than 0.0001%, right? You cannot make an error when you are actually trying to do robotic surgeries and all. So you have to be careful of the use cases. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, model deficit versus algorithm deficit. So you, to justify the use of machine learning, you should see if there is no model or if there's no algorithm. So there's no model means there are problems where mathematical models I cannot come up with. When there's no model, I cannot come up with an optimal algo. Or there is a model, but I cannot come up with an algo because these are complex nonlinear dynamical models, or there's an optimization problem, but it is a nonlinear NP-hard problem, or an integer linear programming problem. There are some problems where you can relax the optimization problem, but in some other cases you cannot. In that cases, machine learning you can justify. Yeah, I mean, I'll not spend on this slide, but it is just a combination of model-based and algo-based. So the traditional systems, I have a physical system, I have a model. On that model, I use a neural network and system design. Yes, this is okay. But actually, what is being proposed is something like this. So there's a system, I have a model, neural network. I come up with an approximate system design, but I have some data and then I have a neural network. So I use this data, this design, and then feed it to another neural network and then do a perfect system design. So using a data plus model method is actually the best way to go ahead. Right. I mean, it's again saying the same things again. So where does machine learning fit in? I don't have to tell you. These are all the fields. And now we are applying for wireless communications. So let's quickly, maybe in the next 10-15 minutes, I want to spend more slides on applications. So I will not spend much time on the basics because I know that there are talks on basics of machine learning that are coming up today and tomorrow. So, but the very high level taxonomy that we all see are supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. But there are several more like semi-supervised, self-supervised, so many more that people are coming with. But yeah, those are other detailed discussions for other days. So let's start with supervised learning. So there are two parts of supervised learning. One is classification, the other is regression. So classification is where I given an input data. My output is discrete. It's either 0, 1 or class A, B, C, something like that. These are discrete classes. So most common example that I show my students is spam versus a regular email that runs in our day-to-day life in Gmail that we use. So first email is where it is a regular email from a person A to person B. But in the second email, if you see, it is something like I need a 24 million USD. I want you to make an account. I mean, we can immediately tell from our experience over the years that this is a spam email. But how do machines do it, right? Spam emails, we tell it that the machine, that it has a lot of words like money, free, bank account, Nigerian prince, etc. in a single email. But regular emails have the word usage pattern is more spread out. The most common strategy for spam versus regular email is I make a bag of words. So these are the words that I want to look at. How many of these words are there in an email? If the number of such words are very high, I will directly push that email to spam folder. But if it is very less like this spread out, then I will put that into a regular inbox. So that's why you see that some relevant emails still go into spam folder, right? You might think why that is happening. It just depends on how your algorithm, what are the inputs it is taking. Yeah. Speech recognition, I mean, you are talking and you wanted to open one of the apps in your phone, or you want to call a person A, B, C, and it's a discrete classification problem. Object detection, is there a dog, is there a cat, is there a bike, is there a human, is there no human? I mean, of course, more fancy stuff is happening like image capturing and all, but that's a different story. But object detection in images, etc., are the most simple examples of classification. Face recognition, is this a man, is this a woman, male, female, young, adult, etc. Very fancy examples nowadays are for smart cars, where to tell if there is an object in the front of the camera, on the side of the camera, yes, no, should I slow down, etc. Coming to wireless network problems, so traffic classification is a very important problem that most operators are looking at nowadays. So I'm trying to identify the kind of traffic that is being exchanged in the network. Depending on the kind of traffic, is it a voice traffic, is it a YouTube traffic, is it WhatsApp kind of a traffic, or is it a emergency call kind of a traffic? Depending on the kind of traffic, I take some decision that if I should give it high priority for this, or if I can give low priority. If it's a voice kind of a traffic, I don't need to focus too much, because people have an innate ability to decipher voice, even if things are crackling in the voice data. But if it's an emergency call, I will give it a very high QoS, quality of service. So traffic classification is an important aspect for wireless. I mean, that several operators like Ericsson, Nokia, they're all looking for and deploying in their networks. Modulation classification is actually the problem which was the first problem that was addressed using deep learning for wireless modulation classification. All the machine learning on this problem has been used using support vector machine, simple neural networks. They have been used since 2000s. Please note that machine learning has been used on this problem from 2000. Deep learning, the deep learning tools have been used in 2016. Okay. So why is this problem relevant? Is that this problem is very very relevant. I mean, even in Indian defense, not although at modulation level, it is generally at a signal classification level. Is it an enemy signal? Is it a valid signal? Is this a signal that I should not try to decrypt, or is it a signal I should decrypt? Is it a signal I should jam? Is it a signal I should not allow to be communicated? So signal classification at a very high level is an important problem for wireless industry that no matter how much you solve, it will still keep coming back. Spectrum sensing, is this spectrum being occupied? Is this empty? Is it, if it's not empty, which kind of a signal is being occupied? GSM signal or a 2G, 3G, 4G signal? If it's a 4G signal, is it a Wi-Fi signal or an LTE signal? So several problems where that you can look at in this domain. Yeah, some similar again. Yeah, this is another problem that is again, I don't know if India is looking at it, but this is quite famous in US. It's called, so in a spectrum, in a secondary spectrum, secondary user environment in a cognitive radio, you want to put some rules on secondary users. You don't want them to transmit at a very high power. You don't want to jam the primary users. To put some rules, there are something called as valid secondary users, and they have some valid RF signatures that this is how their device behaves. So to identify that, you can have some machine learning. And if this signature, RF signature of a device does not seem to obey with the signatures that I have, I will say that this is a malicious device and this device should be blocked. Yeah, I mean, there are several papers from Virginia Tech on this area. You can look at it because actually Virginia Tech works very closely with Department of Defense there in the US. And they get a lot of relevant problems that the defense industry is looking at and they try to solve it. Other wireless related problems are path loss prediction, frequency and bandwidth allocation, localization. I will actually show more problems towards the end of this talk, but this is just a snapshot. Localization, using channel state information for localization is a very important problem that is being addressed nowadays. The second part of supervised learning is regression. So contrary to classification, regression is a continuous classification problem. So I have a data X and I do something called as predicting Y, but Y is a continuous variable. An infinite class classification, I like to call infinite class classification as a regression problem. Where is regression used? Problems that we are familiar with are stock market, weather prediction, etc. So stock market, you see that the stocks are actually, I mean, to the second decimal, third decimal, they are predicted, right? So their regression is used. For weather prediction, we tell that the weather is 27.4 degrees, etc. How do you think they predict at such a level? And some regression techniques are used. Where is it useful for us? We have used it for channel prediction, right? I told you that we were predicting channel quality, not just channel quality. Channel quality is actually a discrete problem. Is it good, bad? Which of the levels of the channel? Is it good at 100% good or 80% good? These are discrete classification problems. But to predict the channel matrix itself, you have to predict the entries of the channel matrix. So there you need to use something like regression frameworks. Yeah, so I like to call infinite class classification as a regression problem. Now moving on to the second domain of machine learning is unsupervised learning, where input data is given, but the output data is not given. So one famous algorithm, what is unsupervised learning? They operate over unlabeled data sets. So input is given, output is not given. But where do we use such problems? The general goal is to discover some patterns and properties of the data. you can use them for compressed representation. So I see that the data is behaving in a particular way. And if it is behaving in a particular way, I can compress it and send it. I don't have to send all the information of this data. Actually, this is very useful for channel state information compression. So for massive MIMO and all, you want to rely on channel state feedback. For channel state feedback, you don't want to send the entire channel. If you have to send the entire channel, you'll be hogging wireless bandwidth. It's a continuous, these are real numbers, right? There's I and Q, real, imaginary, etc. But can I compress it? Can I compress it in frequency domain? Can I compress it in time domain? Can I compress it in spatial domain? There I'm not really looking at an output, right? I give the data, I'm looking at how it is behaving, and I'm seeing if I can do something nice with this data. So essentially, they look at unsupervised learning algorithms, try to uncover some properties of the data, and they try to understand the statistics of the data. Yeah, so essentially the goal is to learn some useful properties of the distribution of the data. So different kinds of unsupervised learning, something that we are all familiar with is k-means clustering. So I'm clustering the data. I'm telling that there are 3, 4, 5, 6 clusters of the data. In each cluster, it is behaving in a particular way. The second most common thing is density estimation, which is a Gaussian mixture model. You want to tell that it is behaving in a particular way. That it has a particular distribution. If it has a particular distribution, once I tell you that it is having a particular distribution, the biggest use of such a thing is you can generate more data. So let's say I give you only 1,000 data samples, but maybe that's not enough to design a learning algorithm. But what I can do is with this 1,000 samples, maybe I can do a density estimation, probability estimation, and I will generate more and more samples which look like that data and use it for machine learning. Dimensionality reduction, principal component analysis. So for instance, you are seeing a high dimensional data, but that high dimensional data, I will not be able to send everything in that data. For instance, in this case, you are seeing a 3D data, but we do something called as principal component analysis. We are projecting it into some new dimensions. In those dimensions, it is behaving only like a 2D data, and you can see that it has some nice properties in this new projected domain. So we can now operate our machine learning algorithms in this projected domain, and designing algorithms for low dimensional space will always be easy. So that is another use of unsupervised learning. Compression. Autoencoders are one very famous unsupervised learning algorithm. So I have some data, I'm compressing it. I compress it enough such that I can recover the data without any loss. Anyone familiar with source coding and source encoding, source decoding? Source coding, what is it doing, right? As opposite to channel coding, source coding tries to remove the unnecessary data. It tries to remove lempel zip coding, etc. Like zipping, right? Zipping an image, zipping data. It is actually doing the same thing. I have data, I compress it enough so that I don't lose the data. For this also, unsupervised learning techniques can be used. And generation of new samples that I've already told. We have used this extensively in wireless channel modeling. So I have only some amount of data. I try to identify the distribution of the data. For instance, right, I go to a terrain, I collect some channel samples, but I don't have time to collect enough channel samples in that terrain. What I go back and do is I try to fit a distribution to that data, but I create new channel samples that look like the same data that I have collected. Then from 1,000 data, I will suddenly shoot up to 10,000 or 1,000,000 samples, because generating new samples once I have a model is easy. And I can train a nice machine learning algorithm with that. Yeah, I can skip these because there are more important things to do. Again, some applications of unsupervised, again, modulation classification. What we can do is, given a data, I can tell you that there are some clusters, but I will not be able to tell you that it is a particular modulation scheme, but I can just tell you that it is a particular, there are so many models. Yeah, mimicking a propagation channel. Like I just told you, I can create new samples of wireless channel. We can do it for resource allocation. For instance, there are several base stations and access points. I want to identify which macro cell, which small cell I have to cluster. In NOMA, most of you may be familiar with, right? I want to do some user clustering. This set of users I can do NOMA, the other set of users I cannot do NOMA. How can I do this user clustering? So there unsupervised learning is very useful. Yeah, this is also some problem that you can tie up with NOMA to base station clustering. Community detection in social networks. I think this is a famous paper which got Emmanuel Abbé some awards. He has come up with some community detection problems. These are like social communities, like Facebook friend communities, like this. Some connections are there. And I want to identify if there are any patterns in these user connections. This kind of help you that what is happening. These are major other social implications. Other big use cases nowadays is vehicle platooning in V2X environment actually. So let's say there are several vehicles that are going on a road. In V2X environments, I need some anchor node. So for this group of nodes, I will define this as a cluster head, and this guy will be talking to the network. But all of these guys will be, all of these cars around this cluster head will be talking only to the cluster head. D2D, V2X communications, clustering again is very useful. Yeah. Like I told you, supervised, unsupervised are two major things that we hear, but there is something in between which is semi-supervised learning, which says that not all the data is labeled, only small amount of data is labeled. What do we do with them? So labeled data, you treat it in a different way. Unlabeled data, use it for a different way, use it for distribution fitting. Some applications there. The third aspect of machine learning is reinforcement learning. Chess game is the best example that I like to give for reinforcement learning. You see, the environment is the chessboard. My actions are which of these pieces I have to move, and I am seeing how the opponent is taking a decision, and then I make a move. But I don't make a move like an intelligent chess player just doesn't make a move based on the immediate move of the opponent chess player. He will think 10, 20, 30 time steps ahead. What could be his move? If I do this, what will he do? If I do A, B, C in my next few steps, what will he do? So that is reinforcement learning. And so reinforcement learning, there's an agent or a player who makes sensor observations. He must select an action based on what is happening around, and he gets rewards, positive for good states and negative for bad states. Positive in the sense that if my piece is dying, then it's like a bad reward. If I don't die, but if I'm able to defeat the opponent, that's like a good reward. So reinforcement learning is modeled very differently. There is an inherent definition that there should be some state machines. I don't like to apply reinforcement learning to any random problem. I only for problems that where there are some nice state machines, I can explain them with the state transition model. That is where reinforcement learning actually makes sense. So Markov decision process play a big role in reinforcement learning because it's essentially a sequential decision problem. The transitions are assumed to be Markovian, and the probability of reaching a new state in the environment from a particular state S depends on the current state and the action that we have taken. Right. So there's a present state, I'm taking an action. The next state depends only on the present state and the action, not on the past. So there's a Markovian property. And based on this state, I take a decision. So that's why it's a Markov decision process. I have applied it to 802.11 protocol throughput improvement because it's actually a, well, let's say we are all connecting to the Wi-Fi node. There's a specific protocol called RTS-CTS protocol, contention resolution protocol, that is used in Wi-Fi. Based on what is happening in my state versus your state, the whole throughput changes. So there's a nice Markov property that you can exploit in this protocol. So you can formulate it as a Markov decision problem and define throughput metrics and improve the throughput compared to traditional networks. So, I mean, yeah, definitely we have shown that it improves over traditional algos. Another famous machine reinforcement learning algorithm that I have used is something called as multi-arm bandits. These algorithms are used in day-to-day by Google and Microsoft. in their ads, or however they serve you ads, right? So for instance, whenever you open a Google search, you see some advertisements on the right side. Did you ever think how these ads appear? Definitely, for the first time when you make a search, they make some random choices. But once you click on an ad, it sends an indication to Google that this person seems to be interested in this ad. So let me show him more ads of the same kind. And of course, they also look at your cookies that are stored. And that's why if you have done some search on Amazon in the past, you will see searches related to the same thing, both on Facebook as well as Google, etc. Because they look at other data on your desktop or a laptop. But the underlying algo is something called as multi-armed bandits. So if you go to a casino, there are several slot machines. When you pull a slot machine, if you have gone to a casino, there will be something called a slot machine. You pull a lever, there will be some, you put a coin, you'll have to put some money in it, and then you pull a lever. You'll see some three circles rolling, and if you hit 777, they will tell that you have hit a jackpot. So, but you don't know which of this machine will give you a jackpot. So you are having a dilemma which of these machines you want to try. Sometimes you want to try all of these machines, right? But you don't have that much money. So you have to take a decision which of these machines you have to try. So that is like called as a multi-armed bandit. So this person, he is facing a dilemma which of these machines to try. Maybe initially he puts 1 cent in each of these coins and he tries all of these machines. He keeps doing that for some time, but after some point of time, you should sit with one machine because you think that it is giving you more rewards. You start liking machine more. The same thing with ads. So you think of each advertisement as this machine. Initially, Google will put all of these machines. It doesn't know which of these ad you will click on. Let's say you clicked on this particular ad. The next time, only ads related to this topic will start coming up. Then maybe if you don't click on any of the ad, the next time he will change the ads. But if you click on any other ad, he will think that Achha, this guy is interested in topic A, subtopic B, subtopic C. So he'll start pushing more and more. You have more concentrated focus on the ads. So I have used this for something called as optimal jamming via reinforcement learning. So let's say there's a transmitter and a receiver, and I have a malicious device. Let's say this transmitter is a malicious device and the receiver is also a malicious device. I want to stop them from communicating. So there are several things that I can do. So I can increase my power level. I can do some different kinds of signals. I can send noise. I can send QPSK, 16 QAM. I can send a 4G signal, etc. So for me, the actions are like this. One action is like sending noise. One action is sending noise with transmit power 20 watts. One action is sending noise with 10 watts. Do I always need to send noise at a very high power level? No, not required. It depends on the power level at which transmitter and receiver are talking. I can just do maybe a 1 watt signal to jam the receiver. That's enough. So these are all the actions that I can take. And I have done some analysis on this. Reinforcement learning, different kinds of reinforcement learnings like Markov decision process, partially observable MDPs. Q-learning is a very standard algo that a lot of people start with. Multi-armed bandits, deep reinforcement learning, etc. Right. Now, after all of this, these things have existed for a long time. But what changed is the deep learning, the application of deep learning, which is a sub-branch of machine learning, basically by using neural networks and connecting them in very different ways. The benefits, like you all know, I am avoiding feature extraction as compared to traditional machine learning algorithms. So deep neural networks can automatically extract high-level features when you give it enough power in the neural network. It can exploit large amounts of data. it can do something called as multitask learning. So I can I can borrow learnings from some other task and put it in another task. For instance, what happens is people have trained computer vision algorithms on some sort of data. They take that machine learning network because they don't want to train it all over again, but they feed their new data and tune it to a different problem. Where has deep learning been used in wireless communication? One success story is designing something called as new codes. Uh, so on x-axis, you are seeing the number of transmissions. On the y-axis, you are seeing the block error rate. On these, at the top are all the traditional codes like convolutional, polar, turbo, LDPC. By using deep learning, these authors, Sriram Kannan and others, they have been able to generate new codes which have done like much better than these traditional codes. Of course, this is with a particular channel. This channel is a channel with feedback. The feedback cannot be exploited in LDPC, turbo, polar, traditional codes, but this deep learning algorithms, they have designed it in such a way that they can exploit the feedback channels with memory, etc. But however, what they say is how the deep code is able to exploit the feedback remains mysterious despite our efforts to train the network. It has been used for improving the throughput of MIMO in millimeter wave networks, in vision networks, etc. Yeah, I mean, I think slides is slightly misplaced, but it's learning a decoder for practical channels. For AWGN, etc., you know how to design a decoder. But for instance, this is what it's showing. There's a code, there's an AWGN channel. I definitely know how to design an optimal decoder. There's a Viterbi decoder, there's a BCGI decoder, etc. And I can always do the best. Machine learning, like I said, right? When theory is known, it will always do the best. But for channels like non-AWGN channel, what is a decoder? I do not know. So there could be bursty noise systems, high power noise systems. Heuristic decoders are typically used. So there we can use neural networks. Yeah, maybe I will skip these and let's go to some more examples. Yeah. So overview of where machine learning can be used. They can be used in physical layer for channel prediction, decoding, demodulation. Some problems people have now, instead of using traditional modulation schemes like BPSK, QPSK, depending on the channel, they are designing a modulation scheme. You can use it for wireless channel pre-coding. Pre-coding is where in MIMO systems you try to design, for instance, you know SVD, right? It's a singular value decomposition MIMO. I do some digital pre-coding so that I cancel the interference between users. So in NOMA, to identify which set of users to pair, you can use it there. In MAC layer, you can use it for MAC protocols, routing protocols, 802.11 protocols, power control, scheduling algorithms, etc. In network layer, you can use it for routing algorithms, topology control, optimal node deployments. Yeah, some examples of it. So several topics that I have explored are physical layer security, throughput enhancement, edge caching. Pre-distortion, spectrum sensing, etc. One problem that I had worked with a BTech student, I kind of liked is what we did was, although modulation classification was studied with deep learning, I just wanted to understand what kind of network is needed under what situations. So we took different kinds of channels, right? The channels that we have taken are AWGN channel, a typical multipath channel, and then we have taken channels with memory. What we have observed is, as you may take an intelligent guess, the kind of the neural network that you need or a deep learning model that you need to achieve classification, high classification in this channel versus this channel versus this channel is different. So what we have shown is typical deep learning, deep neural networks like multi-layer perceptrons work for AWGN channels. For convolutional, like convolutional channel model, like multipath channel models, you need something called as recurrent neural networks. For channels with memory, you need a combination of all of them. So that is what we show in our paper, which is published. Then we did some MIMO throughput enhancements. Then we did UE speed estimation. UE, this is a problem. This algorithm is actually being used by Samsung base stations. You may ask, why do I need to know the speed of the user? If you actually know the speed of the user, you can assign the correct adaptive modulation and coding scheme for that user. If he's moving on a highway with a speed of 100 km per hour, you cannot assign 256 QAM to that UE because the channel is changing rapidly. There's too much Doppler. You will drop to something like QPSK. You'll just make sure that the link survives for such a user. So for that, we estimated the speed of the UE using machine learning tools. Yeah, what did we do at a high level is we collected the channel matrices. We took some correlation and we were trying to identify the Doppler spread. But we don't do all of this manually. What we do is we take the CSI matrices, channel matrices, and feed it to some machine learning network that we have designed intelligently. And the output will be a classification which is speed is less than or greater than particular threshold. And we worked on throughput enhancement in LTE by predicting channels. I mean, I'm not going over all the details, but we take channels, we predict it in frequency, we predict it in time, and what we show here is the red one is on the left side is the machine learning throughput and the right side is what you do traditionally. And we show that with machine learning, when you do prediction, use the predicted channel for doing some feedback, it will have a higher throughput. Yeah. And I did some localization. Yeah, lots of things you can do, caching, beam learning. You can check my website for all of these papers, but I will stop here so that if there are any questions, I can take up and answer something. So machine learning in wireless is used for typically studied using model-based approaches, but some models may not be accurate and they are an approximation. So to adapt to real-time conditions, for instance, in algorithms, some are very, very complex. So Viterbi decoding for channels with memory, the complexity is exponential. If the multipath length is, let's say 4, and I have a QPSK system, the complexity is 2 power L. But 16 QAM, it will be 4 power L, and 64 QAM, it's 6 power L. The complexity changes. In such cases, to design low complexity algorithms, you can have machine learning. Of course, there will be one-time complexity of training the model. After that, it will be like some linear complexity. So machine learning can beat theory only when the models are unknown, or when the complexity is extreme, or when closed form solution needs some poor approximations. Otherwise, theory is always the best. Okay. Please don't write a paper or propose something where you say that machine learning is beating theory. You have to be very careful. When things are known, when optimal models are known, machine learning can only approach theoretical performance, not beyond that. Okay, I will stop here to see if there are any questions and anyone wants to discuss. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yes, please, yes.
Sir, I want to know that, as you said, ML is applicable in theoretical related issues. Okay. So in ML and AI, so can you tell in brief that how we can proceed with ML and how we can proceed with AI for performing some applications?
I'm sorry, I did not really understand the question, sorry.
Okay, using ML, how we can perform some applications? This is first question. Second is using AI, how we can go for preparing some applications. For example, say healthcare related or wireless related, likewise.
So like I said in the first few slides, right? I mean, you need to first know the domain that you're working at. You need to know the problem you're solving. If it's already solved with some known techniques, I don't see why machine learning will add any help. Like I told you, if there is a well-known solution, it's a theoretically optimal solution, then there's no point in using machine learning.
Okay, and
So machine learning is not creating application, in my view. I mean, maybe my knowledge is limited, but in my view, machine learning is not creating applications.
but generally, I have heard that some people, those who are working on the ML, they are saying that we have prepared this application using machine learning. Likewise, we are listening the comments from industry persons. So in that particular view, how we can proceed, or
Yeah,
is it some different way?
yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not really sure. I don't have enough knowledge about other domains, but at least I would say you need to know the problem and then you find ways to solve it and then you apply machine learning. I mean, applying machine learning, I don't know. I'm really sorry. My knowledge would be limited to comment
Uh,
more on that.
Okay, sir. And sir, as you said that this ML, as you go on increasing the updated data, then only the maximum probability is coming to closer. It means
Okay.
maximum, you can say trueness level is up to
Sure.
85 some percent.
Sure.
So it means uh, what is the interval in which you need to update the data? Likewise, the concept or something different?
Very good. I mean, so data updations, there are several rules you need to follow. Definitely, what you said is one aspect to look at. So it depends on the, again, domain and problem become a very important aspect here. So for instance, again, I will like to go back to wireless domains only. So for instance, if you're designing something for an indoor environment, you kind of know that the wireless channel doesn't change for too frequently in an indoor setting.
Okay. For
So
example, for example, sir, say see in hospital industry, say I am having right now data of say 500 patients. So
sure,
this is case one. In case two, I am having data of 10,000 patient, and in case three, I am having data of 10 lakh patient. So
sure.
probably maximum data will give you maximum accuracy. Is it correct, na?
I would say generally yes. Having more data always helps because you will be able to uncover more patterns of the data. How you use it definitely. I mean, if you use 10 lakh in a very dumb way by doing something very, I mean, your algo may not even give you 85%. There could be something called as overfitting, etc., that may happen in a machine learning algorithm. But generally, given more data, it is always possible to do better things than with 500 data.
And recently, I have gone through some research article in which they said that using AI, you can do a surgery better than doctor. So, can you comment on that to
Again, I mean,
enhance our
I'm a
knowledge?
wireless person, so better I don't comment on it. So,
Okay. So, thank you, sir. You have given very nice information, and it is very fruitful. Thank you, sir.
So there is one question related to the multiple antennas.
multiple?
Multiple antennas. When in the
Yeah,
MIMO
sure.
setup,
Yeah, please.
so we have a multiple antennas for the transmitter and receiver. So definitely the ML decoding is very complex, and the antennas are increasing to huge, like massive MIMO, where 256 cross 256 antennas are there. So can we have to collect the CSI, sound state information? So can we apply this ML algorithm to process or to decode the data at the receiver side?
Yeah, definitely. That is one of the works that we have done. So designing a optimal receiver for machine learning. I mean, sorry, MIMO cases. So in an interference setting, right, there are different kinds of receivers: MMSC receiver, MMSC interference ejection combining receiver, zero forcing receiver. These are all linear receivers, and nowadays fancy receivers like called lattice receivers are coming up to improve the throughput. Where lattice receivers have shown almost 6 to 7 dB improvement over traditional MMSC IRC receivers. So of course you'll have to look at the complexity of these receivers, and you can definitely, there are works where people have designed receivers with some deep learning techniques, but of course, I mean, you be careful how you design it. Yes, it is a very valid problem where if you can show that you are actually reducing the complexity or see, I mean, MMSC IRC is a linear receiver. There are some X order of computations that are required for it. You say that you are employing machine learning. You have to show that you are giving more gain than the complexity of a machine learning algorithm. Then it would really make sense to deploy.
Maybe I just think in the suppose in the multiple transmitting, multiple receiving antenna, for example, in a fixed scattering environment.
Okay.
That means both the Earth station and satellite, where the Earth station is having a huge number of antennas, 256, and it is communicating with the satellite. In such scenarios, so the scattering environment is fixed.
Correct.
And suppose in that case, instead of ML decoding, if you go for machine learning, will it be more or will it be more efficient than the
Specific use case, I'll have to look at it, sir. But uh, again, in that case, right, if you know the optimum, just better go with the optimum receiver. If it's a line of sight system, you know what you have to do. If there's less scattering, it's a line of sight system, you kind of know what has to be done. There's nothing fancy to be done, right? If there's no multipath, I mean, traditional, very simple receivers, MMSC receivers will be enough, and you will achieve capacity with such receivers. In that case, what is the need to go for machine learning?
yes?
So you have to pose a question as to what is the channel model I'm trying to look at. I mean, rich scattering environments in an urban setting where there are 32 users, 64 users, I'm trying to push the capacity using 256 antennas, etc. And there, I mean, if you see how the massive MIMO literature evolved, there you see all these complex receivers where people used gradient descent algorithms or LAS, some LAS algorithms to likelihood ascent algorithms to design some receivers. There, the complexity is too high. When you want to increase the capacity of decoding more number of users. In such environments, it makes sense. I think from the question that you posed, at least my first order answer would be like, for such environments, it's more of, it's easy to tell that this is the optimum receiver to do. You don't have to do anything beyond that.
Yeah. And one more question, maybe not related to the today's talk, but it is related to the today's trend. And if you see the papers in ComSat Society journals, IEEE, TWC, or TCOM, much about the TCOM, but TWC is more dominant. And the Vehicular Society, if you see this TVT, a lot of these journals nowadays receives papers more on ML with wireless.
Sure.
And are we deviating? Are we from the conventional solutions and moving towards this ML? Because they expect anything papers which is related to, or they accept the papers related to ML or AI solutions only. The moment we put anything conventional, they say some reasons.
That has become the trend. I mean, I have seen a it's not that theory is dead. There are some problems where you can still apply. So one of the problems that we have been working on at IIT Hyderabad, it is without machine learning only. We designed a new waveform that is crucial for 6G terahertz communications, etc. We don't use any machine learning for that. And machine learning may give you some waveform, but the bigger aspect, sir, is if I want to design standards, will machine learning based waveforms will actually be accepted later on or not? See, I mean, papers is a very narrow thing. It's okay. That's just one aspect. You should not get demotivated that these papers are the only venues to. Yeah, I mean that trend is there, but not necessarily. There's still a good amount of appreciation for traditional theory.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
But it was a very wonderful session, Dr. Sajari. I mean,
Sure.
Definitely you have from the slides itself, we understand that you have a lot of work done in your area,
Sure.
and a lot more to learn from you.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
So definitely, the Triple Team Kanchipuram, and I personally looking forward to collaborate with you.
Sure, sir.
And
Yes.
definitely for the participants, it is going to be a very wonderful talk, and the talk will be shared with the participants later. The recorded session will be shared with the participants through the YouTube link, and they can see, and they can also
Sure,
they
sir.
can also join for any doubts, and directly they can email our
Sure,
chief
sir.
guest, Dr. Sai Dheeraj. And thank you, Sai Dheeraj, for your
Thank
wonderful talk.
Good luck to you all. I mean, I hope you will learn more in this.
Hello.
SAP. Yes,
Hello,
sir.
sir. Sir, can you show your presentation, and in that slide number 2, giving your information, please?
I can just type my website, sir. It is there.
Yes,
All
sir.
the details are available. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, participants, the details of this also we have shared about the chief guest. But if you log into this web link which is given by the chief guest, and it has a lot of information. And personally, I took a lot of information from his website. And moreover, this workshop is planned based on his course, that is ML applications on wireless communication. That was the inspiration for this workshop. That is why I invited him for the first talk. And while over phone also I told the same thing. The inspiration for this FTP is his course, and I request him this course should be floated in the SWAYAM or NPTEL platform, because it's going to be very useful for the researchers who work in this field.
So I've got this request, sir. I am also, see, I mean, I've taught this course a couple of times, and every time I teach, I see that I learn more. So I want to make this more mature before I actually float it on NPTEL. But that's what, every time I teach, I can only see it's improving, because the field is just rapidly evolving. There's nothing like a textbook for this, right? So it's more based on research papers. You have to, so I'm just being cautious before I make it public. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So looking forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Bye. Good luck.
Thank you very much, sir. The session ends now. So the next session will begin by 11:30. So we'll take a small break, and you can join for the next session on overview of 5G mobile networks by Dr. M.D. Selvaraj, sir, at 11:30 a.m. in the same link.